even a worthwhile idea like the Global Maritime Partnership is essentially an idea that is pivoted on the notion of cooperation. And it works best in an arena where all states have certain common interests. That is true for a world which does not have rising global powers. What each of our three speakers this morning identified, however, was a new world that appears to be out there on the horizon, and with every passing day comes ever closer. These are states who are acquiring new capacities, who have different visions of their own interests, and who are rapidly acquiring military capabilities that are able to service those interests. How does a cooperative solution like the Global Maritime Partnership work in what increasingly looks like a new, more complicated global environment where elements of competition will become more and more salient? Bud Cole and Admiral Kaneda flagged that most conspicuously in the case of a rising power like China. Dan talked about a rising power like India. When you look at them in total, what in essence you get is a world that looks suspiciously to be taking the form of emergent multipolarity. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. The United States is still at the top of the heap, still has an enormous concentration of resources. But at the second tier of the global system are arising new great powers with the capacity to maintain control, not over the global commons, but certainly in areas that are of interest to themselves. This fact, however, has consequences because the areas that are important to themselves happen to very unhappily coincide with broader maritime areas that are equally important to the United States and to the global system more generally. And so managing this tension that is going to arise from particularistic interests driven by key rising powers and the interests of the global system, which thus far has been protected and underwritten by the United States, is going to become a central challenge that we will have to face in the years to come. What complicates the situation even further, in my point of view, is that many of these emerging states have been content to pursue two different kinds of policies that are sometimes in tension, but both of which serve their interests. That is, on one hand, they have been content to pursue policies that essentially free ride on the contributions made by the U.S. Maritime Services. So they are happy to enjoy the products that come from the fruits of U.S. power. But whenever possible, they are content to latch on to unilateral solutions that look to carve out different portions of the global commons to serve their own national interests. And so it is this peculiar kind of tension between free riding on one hand and nationalist usurpation on the other that is going to be, I think, one of the challenges that the United States will have to meet. Let me end by saying that when one comes to the bottom line and one looks at the future, I see the long-term challenge as essentially being one of managing the return of new great powers in the international system, the potential for emerging rivalries between these powers, even as the lower end problems relating to maritime security and elsewhere never quite go away. And the big challenge for the United States will be to craft a course that straddles a fine line between paranoia and complacency. We don't want to be complacent simply assuming that American power will remain forever unchallenged. We also don't want to be paranoid and assume that new adversaries are already present before their time. And yet trying to craft sound public policy in a world that is hazy, where you don't have the clarity of who your threats are and over what timelines that will emerge, is going to pose real challenge for the United States.